I believe that God's power will lead us, lead each and every one of us. And I request you to kindly pray for this English service, and may people come from every sides to attend this English service, to listen to God's word. So, you are familiar with what I am about to tell you, but I will tell it even more interesting. So, when I was studying, I think 9th or 10th standard, I don't remember much, but some 13 to 14 years, or maybe 12 to 14 years before, at night, 9 to 10, I saw a bright light coming from the opposite street. And I was wondering what that could be. And this light was growing bigger and bigger, and the brightness was more. And I was just keenly watching that. And what happened was, suddenly I heard people's voice on the streets. So that too, not from my street, but from the other side of the road, from the other side of the street. I could only see the brightness, but I couldn't see what is happening at that side of the street because of the buildings that were before me. So I was curious, and I was just keenly watching that very closely. And what happened is that that place opposite to our home was a common place, as it was a wasteland. So what people actually do is they just collect all the waste materials and burn at the evening or at the night. So this was the practice done by the local people there. So I thought that someone was burning something, but that brightness began to grow more and more and more. It became very huge. So slowly people came from their home, and people's noise were heard by me, and I saw many people running towards that street. So carrying water in buckets, in vessels, and in whatever mediums that they could carry on. So what was it, and why were they all running, is because the house was caught on fire. So it was a hut. So it caught fire. And also I told my dad, and we both went, and a few people from our street, we went there, and we ran towards that place and saw a great fire burning there. It was a very large fire. So that area was filled with many people. So everyone from that area came there, from young person, from very small kid to adult, so elders. So everyone assembled there, and they all tried to quench that fire by throwing sand on that, by pouring water on that, and all they were trying best to quench that fire. And after a few minutes, the fire service came, the fire department came, the officers, they also tried so much hard, but before they could quench the fire, so the situation became worse, and everything was burnt. So like 99% of the belongings, so everything was completely burnt on the fire. So nothing remained. There was an grandma in that home. So she was helpless. I don't know how many of them were staying there in that small hut, but this grandmother, she ran and she cried looking at all this fire and this damage and the destruction. So almost everything was burnt, but nothing happened to that grandmother. She was safe. That was an unexpected fire accident that happened some 12 to 14 years before. So in this incident, after everything that was burnt in fire, so everything became nothing. What all the things that the grandmother had, so nothing was left over. So everything was burnt in the fire and destroyed. So now just place yourself and think in the place of the grandmother, and Just imagine, start imagining about the situation of that grandmother. Suppose you are that grandmother, old grandmother. So you are in that situation. So how does it feel, or how would it feel for you? How worse it would be? So it will be very bad, right? So at the old age, living peacefully and friendly, but instead something unexpected happened there. So that grandmother, she did not have a bed to sleep for that night, no fan, no ID proofs, no cooking vessels, nothing she had. So that grandmother was doing something on the other side of the home, and suddenly, without even knowing what happened, and suddenly she turned back and saw, only then she recognized that the house was on fire. So this was an unexpected incident that changed that grandmother's life completely. So today, many Christian people's life is in this condition. Very good Christians they are. So people are very, very much good in praying, in reading the Bible, in fasting, in coming and attending the church. But still, something unexpected would have occurred in their lives. We don't know what happened in other people's life, but most of the Christians face this. So sometimes things would have gone out of their control, out of their hands. So once everything was in their hands, perfectly well aligned, well settled, everything was in perfect control. But now, when they turn and look their life, the spiritual life or their personal life, so they can say, yes, my situation is also similar to this. Like this grandmother who lost her home due to the fire accident. So they would tell, I was doing something right. I was concentrating on something, but suddenly something unexpected happened in my life. I never had imagined such a cruel thing, such a worst thing that would happen in my life. So in a Christian life, so somewhere or the other, everyone faces similar kind of experience in life. So challenges are a part of life. So no one can say, I don't want any challenge in life. So for example, your examinations are a challenge to you, right? You're fighting so hard to overcome the exams. You're studying so well, spending nights and spending days together, hours together. And what you're doing there, you're trying to solve the challenge there in the examination hall. So all trouble, challenges, problems are a part of our life. So no one can say, no, I don't want this, I don't want that. But everyone has to undergo this. So all these problems does not come or does not belong to Christians alone. So, but to everyone. So everyone, whether Christian, whether from any other faith they are. So everyone must face several experiences like this, several challenges and problems like this in their lives. So in the Bible, God says, in this world you have trouble, but fear not, for I have overcome the world. Which means, this world, till you live in this world, you will have suffering, you have pain, you have trouble. But do not fear, do not lose your heart. Because I have faced all these challenges while I was in the flesh on this earth. I faced all these trials and temptations and problems. So I will give you my strength and my peace to overcome all these struggles that are ahead of you. So God says there will be challenges and there will be troubles and trials. So God never said in any of the passages or any of the books of the Bible, no problem or no trouble will come to you ever. No. Troubles will come on the way, but I will help you to overcome those troubles. So with these words, God comforts his children, his people. He strengthens his people. He wipes away the tears of his people. So today, with this verse, God encourages each and every one of us today. So in the Bible, we see a person who had an incident like this, a similar kind of incident. So life changed upside down in just one day. So he was all right. Okay, challenges was there, but this challenge that he faced, it entirely changed his perspective in his life. So he too never expected such a worst incident would happen in his life. Let's see what happened to that person and who he is. Let us turn our Bibles to 1 Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 30, verse 1 to 5. 1 Samuel, chapter 30, verse 1 to 5. I will read the verse for you, verse 1 to 5. David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burnt it, and had taken captive the women and everyone else in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men reached Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and sons and daughters were taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmel. Okay, that's it. Verse 1 to 5. So verse 1, it says something, and before that, this verse 1 to 5, we already know this. This is a chapter which talks about David's life. David and the Amalekites and the people who were with David, what all happened. Verse 1, it says, and it came to pass when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag and the Semitan Ziklag and burnt it with fire. So what happened before this? Saul was the first king of Israel. So Saul, after God raised him up, he went away from God and he did things of his own. David and Saul were at the starting stage, they were citizen and king. But later, David became Saul's son-in-law. So David's son-in-law, own father-in-law was Saul. So Saul gave his own daughter to David. So, but Saul did not like David's prosperity. Saul did not like David becoming stronger and stronger day by day. He felt that David, if he grows stronger, he would become a threat for me. So I need to destroy him completely. I need to vacate him from his place. So Saul chased David all the time. And we also see in the Bible, David ran for his life. David not stayed in one place. He moved from one place to another because of this Saul. His own father-in-law chased him and was trying to kill him. So at one time, this David set in his heart, now I shall perish one day or the other. So Saul will surely come and attack me and pursue me. So he is going to surely kill me someday or the other. So there is nothing better for me than that I should escape to the land of the Philistines. Philistines, that land was the land of the enemies, one of the enemies of Israel. So Philistines were the enemy of Israel. So now what David thinks here is that, okay, anyhow, my father-in-law is going to attack me, is going to put me to death. So instead of dying in his hands, let me run and be safe in the enemy's land, Philistines' land. So he thought Saul would somehow search for some few months or days, then he will leave that. He will go and look after his own works. So finally, David and 600 men along with him, came and settled in the land of Philistines, and that too particularly in Ziklag. So the land of Philistines, it all had one king. So the land of Philistines were under the king control. So the king of Philistines knew David already, because David killed the Philistine, one of the Philistines, who is Goliath. So all the fame and glorious thing that David did, so this king of Philistines very well knew that. So the king of Philistines knew David, and also knew that he was in Ziklag with other 600 people and families. So they spoke with each other well. So later all the things passed by, and Philistine king and David became friends. They have good terms. So one day the Philistine king planned to wage war against Israel, the people of God, against Saul, David's own father-in-law. So to destroy them and to capture them completely. So David and 600 men joined that battle, but the commanders of the Philistine army, they were not willing to include David and his team. They said to the Philistine king, if this David and his team are coming with us, we won't come with you. If he is coming, just take him and his team and go for the battle. So, but the king of Philistines had no other option than to please his own country people. So he said to David, David, I know who you are. So you are a good person, but this time, for my sake, return back. So David and his men returned back from the king of Philistines. So David was the captain, the leader of 600 men who were with them. So now David was upset, and also his men were also upset with him because of the rejection that the king of Philistines did to them. And it's a disrespect and a disgrace to David. So all face looked dull and sad while they were returning. So now a great shock was waiting for all of them. And it came to pass when David and his men were coming near to Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites have invaded Ziklag and burnt it with fire. So already David and his men were sad. Now their place was burnt with fire. Before David and his team could arrive to that place, their place, Ziklag, the Amalekites did worst thing there. So David had no idea what happened in his place, in his city. So he did not know, is there anyone alive or anyone dead or what kind of damage? Nothing. He did not have any clue there. So now a deep problem arises. What's that? Verse 2 and 3 it says, and had taken all captives. The Amalekites took all the women captives that were there. So both young and women, they killed none of them but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men reached Ziklag, they found it destroyed with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So in verse 2, we see the Amalekites did three worst things. They had taken the women as captives. So the women can't run, right? People can't run. They were all under the control of this Amalekites. Number 2, they did not kill them. They were alive. And number 3, they carried them away. Women, children, the belongings. So now David and his men did not know what happened in Ziklag, because they were coming back from the palace, from the place of the king of the Philistines. From that place till Ziklag to their place, it had 3 days of travel. So they were on their way returning. From a distance, they now recognize a black smoke coming from their place. On the sky they see a black smoke, a large smoke coming. So his heart, David's heart, would have beat faster after seeing that, because of the families that were living there, his families, the families of his people. David and his men I believe that they should have run so madly towards their home, towards their wives, towards their children, whether they are there or not. So they must have seen whether any women or children are burnt in that fire, any injuries that happened, what happened there. After analyzing everything and recognizing that, after checking everything, they understood that only the materials were burnt, only the cities were burnt, but the women's and the children and the belonging were taken as plunder by the Amalekites. So here comes the worst problem, worst situation to David and his men. Because if the Amalekites would have raided the Ziklag and burnt it with fire and burnt the women, children, everything on the fire, that incident would have ended there. So everything would have gone away, wasted away, and all the women, children would have died in that burning. So, if at all, when David and his men would have come there, they would have seen and they would have wept so much louder, and they would have cried a lot for many days for their lost wives and children. So that part would have been ended there itself. But see here, the situation gives more pain, more tension, more sleeplessness, and more heartbeat because they don't know what happened to their wives. They have confirmed that they were not burned in the fire. But where are they? Where are they? So where do they went? So where did they went? Who took them? Nothing. So this makes the situation even more worse. So they don't know where their wives went, their children were taken. So where they are, in which direction they went, or are they alive or not? So no evidence or no information was given to David. So in a bomb blast, recently we had bomb blast in many places, in Bangalore, in Mumbai, many parts of India as well as the other countries, the bomb blast happened. Also, the natural disaster like tsunami, like earthquake. So all these times, the father would be in different place, the mother would be in different place, the children would be in schools, parents would be in the workplace. Suddenly, when natural disaster or the bomb blast happens, all will be running for their lives, right? They won't be in one place. They all will be running for their lives, to save their lives, and they would also try to help others, try to reach their family, friends, relatives, their sons and daughters, parents, and they would gather to one place. So they won't have any idea where their families would be going or staying, or in that fraction of second, what would have happened to their children's wives, husbands, and parents. Are they alive or dead? So imagine how painful that would be. So wife would be in one place, husband would be in one place, children would be in one place. So such was the situation of David and his men. So verse 4 and 5 it says, so David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmel. Here in verse 4 we see everybody lost their beloved ones. Already they were all tired, weary. Now David and his men saw all these things and began to cry. David began to cry first, I believe. Would have probably began to cry first because he was in charge of all the 600 people. He was the leader. The 600 men also cried along with David, each one remembering their families, their wives, their children, their belongings. So in verse 5 we see David was not exceptional here. He was not exceptional. He too suffered a lot by this Amalekites' raiding of Ziklag. because David lost his two wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. Saying all this, those 600 men with David lost all their hope, all their strength, their faith. They lost family, they lost everything. So this was the situation there. Verse 6 it says, David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. David truly suffered a lot of pain that came inside of him, a lot of tears that were outside of him. And we see David suffered a lot in this verse situation. So already David faced a shame before the king of Philistines. Now 2 wives of David were captured. Now this is a challenging task for David. David needs to look after the 600 men who were with him. Also he needs to solve his own problem and needs to take care of himself too. So in such a situation, David faced a new problem. What was it? David was greatly distressed because for the people who were with him, the 600 men, the people who were so close associated with David all the time, those men spoke of stoning David because of all the people bitter in soul. Though all were bitter in soul and all these negative things happened, and now people who were closely associated with David, they talked of stoning. They spoke of stoning David himself. So this is the horrible moment for David in his lifetime. So they all began to blame David, the people who were with David, the 600 men. So the 600 men began to blame David for what all the things that had been occurred there. So what are the things that happened there? So now David was responsible for everything that happened. So how come David be responsible for this huge loss? Because David too traveled along with the 600 men, and everyone went there, left all their homes. So before this incident would happen, those 600 men who were with David, they were very close to David, like a shadow. They all followed wherever David went. They were great support for David, and they were the great hope for David. Now such people, they themselves are now planning to stone their leader now. Think how David would have felt on that place. Think what must have run in David's mind. Thousands of things would be running in and through David's mind. So just think what would have happened there in that situation in David's mind. So problem arose from outside, problem came from the surrounding, and now finally problem came from within, from inside. So David's mind voice would be, Saul was better than all these problems. I should have died by Saul's hand itself. Such was David's state. So David thought, it would be better for me to die in Saul's hand than to suffer with these 600 people who are with me. So even in such a difficult times, problematic times, struggling times, we see David doing a wonderful job here, a wonderful thing here. In midst of suffering, pain, cry, shame, hatred, backstabbing, we see the wonderful thing that David did was David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So it's an amazing thing. Just I was wondering, how come a person in such a worse situation can do like this, can strengthen himself in the Lord? So this is David. This is David's standard, his character. That is why God loved David so much, and that is why God said, David, he's man after my own heart. So he was a beloved to God. Seeing all the challenges, David did not run away. The challenges were true, of course. The struggles were true. The pain were true. But even in that situation, David went to God's presence and strengthened in his God, in his Lord. Out of 600 men, no one, not even a single person thought of seeking God's help, seeking God, his strength, his counsel. But only David did that. So how David would have strengthened himself in the Lord is by prayer and petition. It's by prayer and petition. So David would have complained everything like a child to God. What all the things that happened to him. Lord, the Philistine king just made us ashamed. And we came back and people were very sad. And while I reached my city, everything was burnt before. The Amalekites raided, took everything, took my family, took my wife, took the children and wives of my people who were with, my men who were with me. And he would have just went there and complained like a child to God. So everything that David faced was told to God through prayer and petition. So he would have said within his heart, after praying to God, he would have said in his own heart, David, "O my soul, do not fear, do not be frightened, do not suffer. The living God is with you." He would have consoled his soul from within. There was none to console David in that place. So David's father was very far, his brothers were not there, his mother was not there, his friends, relatives, nobody was there. So no one instructed David or guided or helped David, telling David to go and seek God, so to ask God's help. No. So we find nobody helped or guided or instructed David, but this was David's own decision and initiation to get strengthened in his God and his Lord. So because why David did all these things was because David very well knew that if I go to any other person other than God, nobody is going to solve my problem. Nobody is going to answer my problem. Nobody is going to guide me properly. Nobody is going to strengthen me perfectly. He very well knew that. He was a wise person, David. So he knew that only God's presence can do wonders. And he also knew that only in God's presence that he could get strengthened and not anywhere else. So verse 7 it says, "Then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Abimelech, 'Bring me the ephod.' Abiathar brought it to him." So David immediately, he did not delay, he did not look for a good time. So immediately he approached Abiathar the priest. He called him, he said to him to bring the ephod. An ephod is a part of priest's garment, Old Testament priest's garment. So over the shoulders it would go, and before the chest it would lay. So the bikes, whatever that the vehicle that we ride or drive, every vehicle has its own number plate, right? So this ephod was, just for an example I'm telling this, like a number plate for the priest. So it was before his chest. So this ephod was used to ask God about any decision. If anyone wants to make a decision, ask any decision, he used to have this ephod and ask God. For the queries and inquiries, this ephod was used. So Abiathar the priest brought the ephod to David. So in verse 8 we see, "And David inquired of the Lord, 'Surely shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overcome them?' 'Pursue them,' he answered. 'You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue.'" Now David took that ephod with tears. He would have probably taken that ephod with tears, because that's the most crucial part of his life. He did not know what God is willing to do, and he did not know what is God's answer for this. So he would have took that ephod with tears and would have inquired the Lord, his God, and he asked two important things. Lord, shall I pursue after this band? Shall I go after these Amalekites? Shall I pursue them? Shall I overtake them? Will I defeat them? See, all the 600 men with David saw the situation. Their eyes were only seeing the situation, but David saw God. So David's eyes, it saw God. So now David was waiting for God's reply. Now God speaks. He answered him, pursue. It's a positive thing. Pursue. David asked whether to follow that Amalekites, that enemy. Will I overtake them? God answers, pursue. Go. For you shall surely overtake them and shall surely rescue. So listen here. David asked two things. Shall I pursue after this band? Number two, shall I overtake them? But God, surprisingly, he gave three answers. Pursue. Number one, you shall surely overtake it. You shall surely rescue it. Three things that God did or said to David. So today, many are in this situation, lost something in life. So, any job or peace with someone, or fellowship with someone, or a relationship, or lost calmness, lost love. So, you might tell today, it is out of my hands. Several things I have planned and designed, but everything went out of my hands. So everything went out of my decision. So today, God is with us, who was with David. And he will give us strength to overcome all the challenges. So when will God give us strength? That's the important question. When will God give us strength? God will give his strength when we seek God's presence first, when we seek God's guidance first, when we seek God's strength first. The Bible says, seek first the kingdom of God, and the rest of the things will be added on to you. But added on to you, of course, it will be done, but first seek the kingdom of God. So our strength, our own strength cannot help us. Other people's strength can't help us most of the times or every time. Influence of others can't help us. Our parents' strength, it can't help us. So nothing would be helpful for us. So ask this question to you. In tough times, in worst times, the times like when David faced the burnt Ziklag experience, whose strength are we seeking, or which strength are we holding on to? Whom we are seeking and what are we seeking? So are we seeking God's strength or our own strength? Or in the times of difficult times, are we seeking other people's strength? Today, many Christians do not seek God's strength, his presence, God himself, but rely on their own strength and abilities. They say, I can do this, I can change this, I can do that perfectly. I can do all things with my own strength. My friend can do this for me. He can change anything for me. He will do anything. He will go to any limits to do this for me. My relatives will do this for me. My parents will do this for me. And with their strength, I will come up in life. So, in whose strength are we relying today? God, or our own strength, or people's strength? Whose strength are we holding on to? Today, many are not going near God for strength, for help, for counsel, for guidance. No. they go to every people for help and guidance and strength. So they ask counsel to their friends. So straight away, they go and approach other people for advice and for counsel. So after getting failures from all the other people, finally they come back to God and tell God, Lord, I faced all these challenges. You alone know. So you guide me. So this must have been done at the earlier stage itself. So God and His strength and guidance is not the last option, but God sees your first move. To whom you go in the difficult times, where you go for help and strength, and so on. So the dangers of seeking own strength or the other people's strength is they all lead to destruction, failure, and cheating. So when we rely on other people's strength or our own strength, destruction is the result, failure is the result, cheating is the result. So this is why many Christians are not successful in their lives. Except God, they try everything. So today, when we go to God and approach Him first, when you go near to God for any matter, whether small or big, when we seek God's strength, God gives 3 kinds of strength to us. So David received these 3 strengths from God. So I will make short the message. What are those 3 kinds of strength? Number 1, the strength to pursue the enemy, to follow the enemy. David would have told God, Lord, this is out of my hands, Lord. I can't do anything. But the reply of God would be, or would have been, David, this could have gone out of your control and hands, but not out of my hands. Go, follow them, pursue after them. So that day, God gave David the strength to pursue the enemies. So David had no idea where the Amalekites went, nor did he know the direction where they went, the place, the address, the evidence, nothing. So nothing was revealed to David, or David himself did not know anything. David also don't know whether his wives are alive or dead. Those 600 men's family, their children, are they alive or not? So there were no trace or no helper for David. But with God-given strength, David took the 600 people and he went. 200 of the people stayed before the valley, in the valley. They said, we won't come, we are so exhausted. So David took the rest of the 400. Out of 600, 200 stayed behind, and David took 400 people to the other side to chase after the Amalekites. So they found, surprisingly, in the verse 11 we see, they found an Egyptian in an open country who was wounded in the sense not arrows or something, but sick. Literally means sick. He was sick and was laid in the open country. He did not have food and water for 3 days. Now this Egyptian was brought to David, and David gave him food and water and everything. So this Egyptian was a servant of an Amalekite. He said, we were the ones who raided Ziklag and took. Our team was the one, but my master left me because I am sick. He could not carry me further, so he just dropped me. He just threw me here, and I am here. And God, we see, God gave that Egyptian as a navigation to David, as a GPS to David. So now David pursued the Amalekites, found their place now. The second kind of strength that God gives to His people is the strength to capture and defeat the enemy. Pursuing the enemy is not important, but capturing the enemies is important, and defeating the enemies is important. So in verse 16 we see the Amalekites were enjoying with wine and dancing because of the great plunder they had taken from the Ziklag. They were in the party mode. And now all the Amalekites were drunk. Verse 17 it says, now we see David steps down and fought them. He killed all the Amalekites except 400 people who ran away with their camels. So God gave victory to David that day, and God also gave strength to defeat the Amalekites that day. Today, that great God is in our midst, and He will do wonders in our lives. So the third kind of strength that God gives to His people is the strength to recover everything from the hands of the enemy. Strength to recover everything back. So now, not just pursuing, not just defeating, but recovering everything from the enemy. David till this time did not know whether everything was safe or not, but God gave strength to recover everything from the enemy. Verse 19 it says, David recovered everything, his wives, 600 men's wives, and their children, the plunder, everything. Not even a small thing was missed that day. Everything was recovered safe. So if David would have sought his own strength, he would have failed at the beginning itself. He would have not captured or recovered the lost things or his family. But David sought God's strength. That is why he recovered everything from his enemies, from the Amalekites. So God would have felt happy that day, because David's first move was with his God. He first sought God and his strength. So let us get reminded of the life of David. As David took all the matters, and the first move was David went to the presence of God, to God himself. Let us close our eyes.